Hello, everybody, and welcome. Hope everybody's doing well. I hope that um, the day is treating you nicely. I am running way behind, um, and for not really any reason other than just like I don't know stuff. um, won't go too far into it, but insurance stuff and healthcare stuff and it's messy, and everybody can kind of understand how weird that is in America, where we don't actually care very much about healthcare from the perspective of healthcare companies. But anyway, that's all here and there. I do hope that you're doing well. Um, I'm just realizing that I needed to type something here, and I probably shouldn't have started. Uh, all right, sorry about that. Um, yeah, Claire, I just actually updated that for you, so you can do it again if you want to. You doing well, and you hope that my pants make my butt look good. Interesting. Um, Let me say hello to everybody. Hey, Matt. Good to see you. Um, Tuna is here. Welcome in. Cave Geek is here. Welcome in. Sock now. I love the dropping of the e's. Espero, but spero. I get it, but it takes a while for my brain to pick it up. Um, uh, Estoy así así. No dorme mucho anoche. Tiene problemas con mi mente. We'll just say it that way, right? Um, anyway, but I hope you're doing well. All right. What's up, Boba Fett? Welcome in. Claire is here. I think I said hey to everybody so far now. What's the Leviathan and Liberty? That's kind of the stuff that we're going to talk about tonight. What's up, Moose? Welcome in. Is in classical Latin proper. Oh, okay. So my brain was reading it as like slang Spanish, but I still understood what you were saying, but I answered in Spanish. Okay, this is the problem with my brain sometimes, right? I see things and I'm like, I know what that means, and it doesn't, like, it translates, but it doesn't translate. Yeah, like it's one of those like really overwell lapped. Um, Zarnaya, welcome in. Good to see you. I recognize you from Quill Tony's stream. Um, yeah, I was actually in. Let me give a shout out. I think that's how she spells it. Yes. Everybody should go follow Quill Tony. Friend of mine that I met last year. Delightful human being. You can meet people, and within like just 2 seconds, right? You just know that they're good people, and that's Tony. She's just a good person, but she does quilting for a living, and her stream is all about quilting. So you should go follow her and hang out and watch some quilts being done. Yeah, it's good to see you back. I'm glad you came back around. Yep. So we are in a series that we've been working on now for several months about the history of government and politics.
You shall have camels, horses, an armed escort, provisions, desert vehicles, and tanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Claire, for the corgi bits, as always. I do need to change that alert. I need that. It just doesn't fit anymore. I don't know what I'm going to change it to. What's up, Noger? Welcome in. Claire, it's not the amount, it's the thought. I appreciate that way more than the amount. So anyway, we are in this series on government and politics, and if you haven't been around, that's okay. You don't necessarily have to see every episode to catch up to where we are. This does follow pretty closely from one to the next, though, so it might refer back to things that you are perhaps not super caught up on, and that's okay. If you want, you can go check out the VODs on YouTube. Did I ever notice that my mic is making sounds? I'm not sure exactly what you mean by making sounds. Like, is it popping, or is there like a fuzz or a buzz or something like that? A hum, perhaps? Perhaps there's an interesting or unusual historical coinage to change. Yeah. Perhaps. Claire, I don't think the puppy is sleeping. She wasn't when I walked back here. Figment! What's going on? Welcome in. And congratulations for several things. And I'll just kind of let that hang, and you'll know what I'm talking about. Figment, it's really good to see you. I was actually looking back through pictures yesterday of the trip to Turkey and thinking fondly of hanging out and having a good time and climbing up mountains and stuff like that. So it is good to see you. Let me call the puppy real quick. I think my wife is having to help her come back. My wife was, I think, cuddling with the puppy. Oh, she's got the chicken with her. Oh no, I don't have the cam on. Hold on a second. We might have to do. We might have to take alternate methods. Hey, Kaylee, come here. No. Come right here. Come see me. Hey, come here. Oh, there's an itch. Hey, what are you doing? Hey. She wasn't sleeping. I think she was cuddling with my wife. That's different. Hey. You want to come and see me? Come up here. Come up here. Come here. Come up here. You can come up here. You've done it before. Come here. Come on. Come on. You can get right here. Come on. There you go. There's a big puppy. There's a girl. You're good. Where are you going? Do you want to get back to the couch? Is that what your whole thing is? Okay. She's not too terribly interested in being over here. Maybe she'll come back around later. I will get the camera running. I was just completely out of things. Didn't even have the puppy cam running. You'd also want to be on the couch. Yeah, I hear you. Do, 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 do. All right. There's a better than 0% chance that she'll come back around, and if she comes back in, we'll put the camera up. We're getting used to sleep deprivation, but it's good to have a new adventure. Yes. And you've had a few memories from the turkey pop up recently. You missed those times and grateful to have had. Yes, exactly, Figment. It's for we won't have to go into the whole thing, but Figment and I have been friends for oh gosh, what now, like 10 something years? Longer than that, 12, 13. Anyway, a while, and have been on multiple international trips together. Figment was on the trip when we went to Jordan, and then Figment and I went with another colleague to Turkey in 2015. So, good friends. We live really, really far apart in the country, and that obviously prevents us from hanging out more. But, you know, there's a friendship that extends into the ethereal plane where you can tell that people are thinking about you, I think. Anyway, so as I was saying, based on the sleep deprivation and the new adventure, you're going to say congratulations. I think that's in order, Claire. I think that's a good call. So anyway, we've been talking about politics and government, and tonight we are going to get to some stuff that is probably going to look a little bit more familiar than some of the things that we've talked about previously. We're getting back to some of the stuff that would have been covered in an actual government class if you took it in high school. Of course, I think that our government classes don't cover enough, and they don't have enough background material on all this stuff, which is one of the reasons why I'm doing it the way that I think that it should be done. Not that I expect anybody to use this academically. We just spent like 17 minutes with me grousing about my day and calling a dog and talking to friends, none of which are inherently bad, but obviously not necessarily the best intellectual educational content, except if the lesson is be like Peter Pan and stay young for as long as possible, because when you get old, stuff starts sucking. Just don't grow up. If you can stay young, just stay young. But anyway, let's pick up with the subtitle. So we're in the 12th edition of History of Government and Politics, but we're going to look tonight at a couple of different ideas, and one of them is based around this concept of the Leviathan. And to talk about that, we're going to have to introduce the guy who wrote the book, The Leviathan. This guy's name is Thomas Hobbes. I dropped out of the class. My professor became an anti-vax libertarian nut and brandished his politics. Oh, wow. Yeah, I could see that being a reason to drop out of the class. I stopped going to see a doctor who became vocally anti-vaccine. And that person then caught COVID and spent about 3 months in the hospital and almost died. I do not know if they currently have changed their mind about vaccination, but I could not in good faith go see them as a general practitioner anymore. So I had to change doctors. So I'm with you, Sock, now. But who is Thomas Hobbes? All right, so first off, this guy was an English guy, was born in 1588, died in 1679, and we don't need to go too much into like his history or his background. The highlights are, he had sort of the classical educational experience in England. He was taught Greek and Latin. He got really interested in languages as a practice and actually spent a lot of his early writing career doing translations from Greek and Latin into English. And that, got him a little bit of, not necessarily like fame, but a little bit of, credential. But translating a lot of these old texts is going to be what sort of triggers his transition into thinking about politics and specifically human nature and a specific sub branch of philosophy called political philosophy. Now, political philosophy itself was not brand new. There were obviously people writing philosophy that had political elements in it going back hundreds and thousands of years, right? We see Aristotle and Plato, Socrates all talking about government to a certain extent. Plato obviously wrote The Republic, which is a really important book that a lot of ideas come from. And then you have people throughout the classical era, late antiquity, people into the medieval period. We've talked about a lot of these people. So there had been some people writing about politics for a while, but it wasn't necessarily very popular, and it wasn't something that happened a lot. You would usually go a pretty big jump between people that were writing stuff. So like, when we have the medieval period and we see someone like Thomas Aquinas, who wrote a lot about natural order of things and had some political ideas. It's several hundred years after Aquinas that we get the next really big and important work, which we talked about in episode 11 with The Prince and Machiavelli, right? So it's not necessarily something that is a vogue concept. It's not something that a lot of people were interested in so far. But what we're going to see transition between the beginning of the stream tonight, which is at the very, very earliest part of the Enlightenment, to the end of the stream, which is kind of at the midway point of the Enlightenment, is people are going to be more interested in talking about this stuff. And as a sort of continuation of what we've been talking about, a way to sort of tie all of this together, again, one of the reasons we're seeing more ideas about politics being discussed is because there are now a growing number of political options, right? So we talked in the last episode about how we had kings, but we had multiple different types of kings, not just the absolutist monarch, but we also had constitutional monarchs, right? We talked about these princes, people that were running city-states or semi-independent kingdoms and border zones that all had their kind of own little legal structures that were more or less autocratic or more or less democratic. And we talked about republics in a couple of different examples. The Dutch and the Venetians all had their own kind of own little way of doing stuff. The Florentines. So we've got all of this different version of political stuff happening. So we're going to get more people interested in writing about it. And Hobbes is one of these people. The professor was old, in his 60s, and still teaching. He was the only guy in community college you were at. Oh, interesting. Claire's me with my copy of The Republic right beside me. The Republic is a really important book. And we sort of overlook how fundamental a lot of the ideas in the Republic were to later, unless you're like really, really deep into political science, like later thinkers are going to have read the Republic. And a lot of those ideas kind of creep into different areas. And the ideas inside of the Republic today don't necessarily all hold up. A lot of them are very clearly antiquated, very clearly products of the time and the culture that produced it. But it's still a really valid read. And if you're interested in government and politics at all in a Western sense, The Republic is a really important book to add to the list of reading. If you're trying to get this more in a global sense, the Republic is also going to influence other writers from different cultures. You start seeing some influence from Plato in some of the Islamic writers that are writing mostly in the sort of golden age of the Abbasid dynasty or caliphate, whichever one you want to call it. So it's not just, a thing. It's kind of still a thing. But anyway, Hobbes is going to be really interested in some new ideas. And he's going to try to base these in old ideas as a way to kind of get established. MG Class of 14, thank you so much for the follow. Welcome to the adventure. You've read Republic. Plato was a madman compared to modern life, but you would still say that his system has 3 or 4 parts that are still valid. Yeah. So again, it's not like a thing that would work very well if we just made it happen now. But it's got some... You can see the roots of things, if that makes any sense. Okay, so Hobbes has got new takes on old ideas, and he wants to explain why and how. So let's kind of get into Hobbes' ideas, and this is going to get us to the Leviathan. So first off, Hobbes looks at human nature. And we've talked a lot about human nature in this series, so we don't have to go through all of it. But he has a couple of fairly basic premises when it comes to humanity in what he would call the natural state. So the natural state is supposed to just be humans as they were prior to anything and in their most original sort of primal function, right? And he's got a really negative opinion of humanity. He thinks that humanity in its natural state is pretty horrible. He says that we are violent and greedy, and that we are selfish and self-serving, and he tries to undo some stuff that some of the other previous political philosophers had set up. He tries to argue that in a natural state, there's no such thing as humans doing anything for the good. Like, it's not natural to just sort of hold on to these sort of overarching narratives of the good existing outside of humanity. He doesn't really think a lot about sort of a non-material existence. He thinks that everything is pretty much just what we have. So nature is very mechanical. It's very, again, materialistic. It doesn't have a lot of... like he's got some opinions on religion that we'll talk about here that get him in a lot of trouble. But humans are basically bad. And if you leave them alone, they're never going to be able to achieve anything for good. They're going to basically exercise their power however they want to. And we've talked about this idea of power. It's a central concept of government. This ability to affect things and people around us. Hobbes would say that the people are going to use their power to protect their interests, and that's what they're going to do. And in a natural setting, that can take on any form that you could think of. This could be, I'm going to grow food. That's protecting my interest. I'm going to use my power to grow food. But it could also be stealing food. I'm going to wait until you grow all of it. I'm going to go to your house. I'm going to hit you in the head with a stick, and I'm going to take your food because I have the power to hit you in the head with this stick. And while you're growing my food, then I'm going to play. Or go hit other people in the head with sticks, and I'm going to then hoard food, and I'm going to gain power by doling it out to the people that I like, right? So the natural world is humans at their worst doing whatever they feel like to get whatever they want, right? So anarchy, but not the positive tilt anarchy that we'll see in the next stream when we get to some of the liberal thinkers who believe that humans are inherently good, that if you remove all the rules, they would take care of each other, right? So very different. How are protests different in history as compared to now? Are they more violent or less violent? Significantly more violent by both destruction and body count. Our modern country in the United States has violent protests, but the violence seen at our protests is nothing in comparison to protest historically. Protests historically spin up into rebellions that kill tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people. The ancient world had much less connectivity, and people tended to have much less connection with the people that were actually making the governing decisions, and therefore the only way they could get the attention of these governing representatives was to do increasingly more radical or violent things. So it's just a fact of the matter that, and I'm not trying to downplay the violence of the modern world. I don't think that looting or like any of the violence that we see today in protesting is necessarily legitimate. I understand why people think that it is. I'm a personally a very nonviolent person. I don't really think that's necessarily the right way to approach most problems, but of course I have the privilege and permission of being on the benefiting end of a lot of social stuff that would make it easier for me to say that than other people, right? But the modern world is not nearly as violent as the ancient world or the historical world. Let's not forget that the French Revolution started off as political protests, right? The American Revolution started off as political protests, right? Yeah, we don't even use the guillotine, right, Kyle? You've totally played this as a board game. You've played Anarchy. Is that a board game? Or you've played Leviathan? Hoarding supplies. Oh, I see. Yeah. What's up, Chris? Welcome in. So, Hobbes says that we're bad, right? We're bad, and in a natural state, we're going to do bad things. We have power, and because we have power, we are dangerous, right? Just to be honest, Hobbes has, a very blunt, very straightforward view of humanity. We also do have some rights. And one of the biggest rights that we have is the ability to protect ourselves. And when we say protect ourselves, here we mean not just like from physical violence, but also like, economic abuse, or we have the right to protect ourselves from political abuse, etc. Are you saying to me that the ancients, like Greece, were more violent? How dare you? Yeah, the ancient world, just as a whole, is more violent and more deadly than the modern world. Now, if you want to cherry pick specific examples, like the most violent place in the world today compared to the most peaceful place in the world in history, you're obviously going to be able to go, but McInnes, aha! And I'm going to say, congratulations, you can do a cherry pick fallacy, right? But in general, it's pretty obvious. There's actually a big conversation on Twitter about political violence that just happened last night, where the AI large language model Grok contradicted Elon Musk about political violence, and Elon Musk said that he needed to go fix it because obviously the AI was wrong. Anyway, that's enough about Elon Musk. Anyway, so we all have rights, and foremost among them is the ability. Elon's going to work on it. Yeah. Foremost among these is the right to protect ourselves, right? Now, one of the things that Hobbes said here is pretty, well, let's just say volatile, right? This is the easiest way of saying this. One of the things that Hobbes put forward that caused a lot of feathers to be ruffled, right, was that every human is this way, right? So in this way, we are all the same. Every human in a natural state has the same rights and has the same capacities. And just by saying that as sort of a generalized statement would obviously make some people uncomfortable, but then he sort of doubles down and makes sure that everybody knows what he's talking about, because he'll also say, and this includes government officials, and this includes the clergy. So it's not just the everyday average English citizen that's going to run around and go crazy if we revert to a natural state. This is every human. and every human is the same. You can right away see that this is going to cause a stir because politicians, namely kings, are going to go, no, I would never do that. I am above all of this. And the clergy, of course, are going to say, pious, right? And this gets Hobbes in trouble, and we'll talk about the trouble a little bit more later on. Okay, so we're violent, we're bad, we have power, we have rights. So why do we need government? And this is where things actually kind of twist a little bit, because Hobbes is actually making an argument here for a very strong centralized government. And you might go, well, he just sounds like he spent, a large portion of his life talking about how horrible people were. And he did. And we're kind of following along the ideas of the book Leviathan, which is his big book, where he kind of lays all of this stuff out. What's up, KP? Welcome in. You prefer Calvin? I see that one. I got you. Anyway, so what are his ideas on government? Now, one of the roles that he expounds upon in this idea of our right to protect ourselves is the ability to form governments. And he said, okay, here, if we take humans and they're horrible and we give them this right to protect themselves, one of the things that is logical for them to do is to form arrangements with each other, right? So what we are doing is we are entering into social contracts where I am going to protect your interests and you are also going to protect my interests. And when we put our power together, what we are doing is binding ourselves to this new concept that he, says is government. And this is how he thinks that governments came to be. People that are working together to collectively protect their interests and exercise this right of protection of self in a macro kind of way, right? So this is where government comes from according to Hobbes. Now, he goes through different types of governments and will say, like, these are, these all have some level of merit, right? He'll say democracy has some level of merit. Oligarchy has some level of merit.
I'm Spartacus!
I'm Spartacus.
I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus! I'm Spartacus!
Kilter Preacher, thank you so much for being Spartacus for 47 months. It's crazy that I have been streaming for just about that long, and it's still not really setting in that this is a thing that I do now just about every week, right? But thank you so much, KP. Welcome. Welcome into the chat, rather. So, democracies, oligarchies, but
Are you not entertained?
Don Factorial is here.
Is this not why you are here?
Is that not why you are here? Don Factorial, thank you so much for the raid. If you are not following my friend Don, you really should be. Don's a great guy. He is a math educator and will help you learn math. Don was one of the guests on my epic crossover streaming event a couple of weeks ago. Taught me things about calculus that my college professor never told me about calculus. And I now literally appreciate the functions of things in ways that I probably should have in college when it was taught to me. You should go follow Don, hang out in his chat. He also plays video games. He's been playing DayZ, which is a really interesting game, a little bit later. Don, how was the stream? How's it going? Welcome in to everybody from Don's chat. My name is Shane. I teach history and sociology and anthropology at college. And we are in a series on the history of government and politics. And we're talking about this guy, Thomas Hobbes. To give everybody like the 30-second catch up, Thomas Hobbes thinks that we're all horrible and that if we're left in a natural state, we're going to eat each other's faces off. And this is why we need government, right? We need government to keep ourselves from eating each other's faces off, right? What's up, Snowlock? Welcome in. Now, here's the thing, and Hobbes is very clear about this. When we form this social contract with other people, we are giving up some of our power, right? By taking power that we possess as an individual and putting it into this contractual binding agreement, we are giving up our power to the agreement. And this is an interesting and very important part, because what's going to happen a little bit later is this is going to come back sort of and bite us in the rear end. It was good. We solved problems from a pretty neat exam given to 12th graders in Portugal. Well, that's pretty cool. It's pretty legit. How did you find a 12th grade exam from Portugal? Now I'm like, now I want to know how you found that to begin with. Did somebody that was one of your viewers like give you that? We are leopards, right? MG says, why I believe the realest Loki ever said in Avengers is this not your natural state? You see freedom as the world's biggest lie. Ooh, yeah. So it's a very political loaded statement there, MG. Right? Because this liberty is based on giving up of things. Yeah. Femvox says he was good until he teamed up with Calvin. Yes. And then they tended to just sled a lot. The leopards will not eat my face, says Brian. A Portuguese chatter suggested it. Well, there we go. There are some videos on YouTube on these foreign math problems. Your husband is a human calculator and loves them. Oh, that's cool. I'm glad that there are people that are really good at math. I can do math, but I'm very, very slow at it, and it's very frustrating for me. I have lost a lot of my math simply from underuse. Right. If you give the leopards tummy rubs, they'll be happy, right? So, what is Hobbes going to say that we should do? So we make this social contract to form collective protection units, but do we do it with democracy? He says, no, that's not really that good. Because what ends up happening is that we all try to keep too much of our own power when we make a democracy, and we never decide on anything. We just keep splitting into infinite factions and never getting anything done. What about aristocracy or oligarchy? He says, well, that's a little bit better, but the problem there is you start dividing people's power based on things that are not natural, stuff like money or social class, and people forget that we're all the same. And when we do that, obviously, we're going to end up running into problems. What he suggests is that we should just have a monarchy. We all need to pick a single ruler, and we all need to surrender absolute sovereignty to that person. If you have one person, that person's in charge of everything. There aren't divisions of power to cause infighting. There aren't a lot of people involved in the decision-making process, so decisions can be made very quickly, right? And with one person in charge, we have a very stable government because there's nobody trying to put their political faction first or promote this idea over that idea because one person's ultimately making all of the decisions, right? Animal Farm kind of went the other way on that one with one is more right than the other. Right. Another fun fact about Marvel, Benedict Cumberbatch can't say penguin. I've seen someone reference this. I have not seen the video itself, and that's okay. So basically what he's saying, Hobbes, is that if we have a sovereign, that sovereign should be sovereign. And what we mean here is that person should have absolute power. Because this is where the Leviathan concept comes in. Humans are this big, unwieldy thing. And when you mass us together to form a state, we are without direction, we are infighting, we are dumb and bad. And what we need, according to Hobbes, is one person to tell us how to act. We need one person to act as the director of the Leviathan, right? This big scary thing with a whole ton of power, but no real sense on how to use it, right? So this big dumb animal, right? This is what Hobbes kind of says that we are as a society, just big dumb powerful animal, right? and the sovereign is supposed to be the one that guides us, right? Does that one person have to be a role model? That's a great question, Radical. And Hobbes would say, yeah, that person really does need to be virtuous. Now, this is fine. We can go ahead and get into this. When we say virtuous, what do we mean when we say that? Do we mean virtuous like Aristotle virtuous? And the answer here is not necessarily. Hobbes has a lot of nitpicky stuff to do with virtue ethics from Aristotelian points of view. What he means when he says virtuous is that this person should be acting with the will to protect the people, right? The decisions of the monarch should be ones done in the best interest of the people. They should have all of the power, but they should be expected to act wisely, judiciously, etc. Now, it's to be noted that Hobbes was very clear that when you submitted your power to the monarch, that the monarch was a human being and capable of acting irrationally, being a horrible person, doing horrible things, killing people indiscriminately, right? Just because that one person has the power doesn't mean that they're going to use it well. You bet kings love this guy. Frank, you would be surprised. I guess I can tip the hand a little bit and tell you that when he was trying to publish this book in English, the king forbade him to translate it into English. It was originally published in Latin and then in French. He said, "No, you can't publish this in English. We don't want this getting out in English. No. You can't do that." Because again, Hobbes reinforces this idea that a king is just another human. There's nothing special about him except for the fact that everybody invests this king with their power, right? You said that just as I started saying the king had... Yeah, okay, so the... right. The king is a human and can be petty and can be malicious and has the same drive to protect his personal interests. And while the king in Hobbes, that is the virtuous king, is supposed to act to protect everybody, he's still a human and can still do things to protect his personal interests first. And because he has all of this power, well, he can kill people randomly, right? But again, this is the government's job. The role of the sovereign is to protect the people, both from their self and from enemies outside. The king is supposed to set regulations on activity to say what is and what is not eligible for or good for everybody, what is legal and not legal. And the king is supposed to prevent chaos, right? So the king's job here is to make sure that the country runs well. And this is an interesting thing here because part of this social contract, again, it's a contract. So if you understand how a contract works, party A says that they're going to hold up certain ends of the bargain, and party B says that they're going to hold up certain parts of the bargain. And this is also something that, and Frank will hear this immediately and go, oh, yeah, that's bad for kings. The role of the king is to govern with the consent of the people insofar as he's supposed to keep everybody protected. Now, if the king can't protect you, you have the power to choose somebody else to be king. So now we're getting into the contract part where I'm going to cede my individual sovereign power to you as the monarch, and you are going to protect me. But if you're not protecting me, I have the right to protect myself. And I could do that by ignoring you. I could do that by giving my power to someone else. I could do that by forming a rebellion against you, right? It feels like there's a Monty Python skit in there somewhere. Kind of sunny. It also helps if you know a lady of the lake that has a bunch of spare swords, right? I think I shared the meme in the Discord, maybe yesterday or the day before. But it said, perhaps strange women lying in ponds and distributing swords was not a bad way of picking a leader after all. I'm a gigantic fan of Monty Python, by the way. The problem stems for who gets to define virtuous. Yeah, that's very true, right? If you have a problem, Hobbes solves it. Crown up the sovereign, then don't gripe about it. Yep. This is whether history question in the historical records of storms. Did COVID let the storms get out? I'm not sure if I'm following, MG. Are you saying that during COVID there was some sort of like meteorological event that made storms worse? I don't think so. If so, I think that what we could also just point out is that the climate is changing and storms are just going to get worse because the world is getting hotter. Welcome, Silver. Hope you're feeling okay, man. Hope you got some Tylenol or some Advil or something like that. I don't think COVID as a pandemic has anything directly related to meteorological events. I think, if anything, it has stuff to do with humans affecting the environment by expanding into the environment, but I don't think that necessarily directly caused COVID to happen. Yeah, I think maybe the translation software was the issue. Okay, so we're in a social contract. The king is driving the Leviathan, right? Like Muad'Dib on the worm, right? But that's actually a really good metaphor. If you know what Dune is, or if you've seen the movie Dune, you'll know that the wisest of the Fremen revere the worm for the power that it has, and they only use the worm in a symbiotic contractual relationship, right? But you don't mess with the worm, right? Because it will literally eat you and destroy you. I just stumbled upon that, Frank, and I feel very I've a little feather in my cap for that one. Anyway, so the Leviathan is being driven by Muad'Dib, and Muad'Dib understands this, and Muad'Dib has got to be a good ruler, right? But the kicker here is Hobbes is going to push things a little bit further, right? Again, he's very materialistic. He's not very spiritual. He's going to spend about the second half of the book in Leviathan talking about how religion really just sort of makes government worse, right? Because what ends up happening is that so first off, Hobbes doesn't particularly believe in a lot of the religious stuff, like whether or not he even believed God was possible is kind of in doubt. I don't personally, if you ask me, was Hobbes religious? I'm going to tell you no. He might tell me differently, but it definitely doesn't look like it. He doesn't believe in universal good or evil. He thinks that he doesn't really believe in a universal morality. He does agree that it is virtuous for us to want peace. And he says that this is sort of a universal thing where most people just want to live in peace. And he will say that harmony is a virtuous thing as well when we act together and we put our power in line where we get that really good exponential sort of growth of power. If you do some of the math stuff that Don could probably explain better, one person pulling can do this much, but two people pulling in many cases can do more work than just 1 + 1, right? It's like maybe 2.2 or something like that, right? So you get this sort of like momentum of big numbers. And when society all agrees that these things are good and we all get behind it and we all aim towards it, this is a good and virtuous thing. You thought Dune was inspired by Star Wars. So Dune was written before Star Wars. Star Wars didn't come out until 1977. Dune was written in, well, it depends on when you want to look at, like when it was published or when it was first serialized, but we'll just say generally the 60s. 65 is when Dune itself came out, but the Frank Herbert had been writing in it for years prior to that. Steve Sketches, what's up, man? Welcome in. We live in a society. Hobbs, probably. Yeah, right. Star Wars is just Flash Gordon plus Monomyth. Oh, I thought it was Galaxy Express 39. Anybody know that reference? 4 twos sum to 8, but they multiply to 16. There you go, Frank. That's what we're talking about, right? That's what we're talking about. So this is Hobbs. Now, he writes this book, The Leviathan, and he wrote a lot of other stuff. He wrote about citizenship. He wrote about some of his morality stuff kind of on the side. He wrote actually quite a bit. But when Leviathan was published, this book was actually really, really unpopular. Again, the English, the king banned him from translating into English. Parliament put him on trial. Not necessarily on trial. Parliament was about to pass a declaration against him, and they were going to declare him a blasphemer, right? Because he was talking about how kings couldn't claim to be sovereign because of God, because God was kind of like not really a thing. If God existed, it's more like a material human thing that we all kind of have inside of us. Anyway, the religious stuff got him in a lot of trouble. If they had declared him a blasphemer, they could have put him in jail, right? He didn't end up getting declared that. The vote in Parliament didn't actually end up going against him. But a lot of really intelligent people just pooped all over this book. Leviathan was burned publicly at Oxford, right? So like the Oxford teachers had an event where they literally just burned copies of Leviathan. It was not really well received. But what's interesting here is that everybody read it, right? They weren't reading it because they thought, oh man, this is a great book and I'm going to go get some good stuff out of it. Most of the people that read it pretty clearly read it because they hated it. They were hate reading. It got cited a lot, and a whole bunch of people that were, really instrumental in the sort of political world end up reading it just so that they can write a critique of it that just slams it, or just so that they can write a refutation of it, right? He never really got very rich off of the book. The publication stuff back then was still pretty sketchy, and you really didn't make a lot of money off of publishing stuff. Most of the money made by publishing went to the people doing the publishing itself. You probably got maybe a check up front, and then maybe some residuals, but they were probably just going to give you a lump sum up front, and then however many sold, they were going to sort of eat, right? Yeah, it's still kind of that way, right? But anyway, so Hobbs is an interesting guy, but people start talking, right? People start talking. And when they start talking, these ideas are going to proliferate. If I say something in the scheme of political philosophy, you can then come up with your own opinion, and you can write something that goes against me. And now we have a discourse about political philosophy. And this is what's really going to start kicking up. And this is going to be continued by a guy that a lot of people don't talk about. And if I'm being really honest, he's ultimately not the hugest of figures, but he is important for this little moment. This guy's name is Robert Filmer. Sort of a character that you don't get on the bus tour of government class. You might get 3 sentences about Hobbes where I just talked about 45 minutes about Hobbes. You're probably not even going to get 2 seconds about Filmer. Illiteracy is the way to go. Then you don't catch the ideas, right? If I can't read, you can't get those crazy ideas in my head. He doesn't have a stuffed tiger named after him, so he can't be that special. This is correct. So Filmer was alive 1588 to 1653. Filmer's an interesting character here because he was a conservative, and specifically, he was a royalist conservative. So if you don't know what's going on in England, that doesn't necessarily make too big of a deal for you. But in the early and mid 1600s, one of the things that's happening is the English Civil War. And specifically, the House of Stuart is going through all of this crazy stuff. Cave Geek, if you're still in the chat, Bonnie Prince Charlie, now you have to drink. That's an inside joke. He'll get it. Some of the other people will get it. But anyway, being a royalist during this time period is not really that popular. Yeah, he's old money and old educated and classical educated. He is going to have very different opinions than Hobbes. And after reading Hobbes, Filmer is going to write a book called Patriarcha. And you can just sort of like hear from the title, like, oh, I bet that's a good one, right? Patriarcha. And the book is effectively a takedown on Hobbes, right? He gets really upset at Hobbes and says, no. First off, you denied God. That's just wrong. As a conservative, as a royalist, I believe deeply in God. And he's going to take up the mantle of the absolute monarchist. And specifically here, one of the ideas that he's going to champion very openly is the divine right of kings. Now, we have talked about the interplay between religion and government going all the way back to literally the first governments that we know about, right? Humans have been mixing politics and government and religion since the beginning of politics and government and religion. But the divine right of kings is this idea that the sovereign rules because God said so, right? And that they were chosen by God and given the power to be sovereign by God, and that the power of God to appoint the sovereign made the sovereign more important than everybody else, because God didn't pick those other people to be sovereign. God picked this person to be sovereign. What is my take on U.S. literacy rates? They're low, and they should be higher. The world likes to dunk on the United States when they get a chance to, but our reading rates are one of the things that you should dunk on us for. They're abysmal, and they should be way higher for the most industrialized nation on Earth. We fail our students in educational processes, and not making them learn how to read is one of the biggest failures. But I will say that everybody is rushing towards illiteracy as fast as they can by continuing to use large language models and not thinking for themselves, right? But anyway, so Patriarcha is going to argue for the divine right of kings. It's going to absolutely trash Hobbes, right? But there is an interesting idea here that gets put forward that's kind of new. And this is a biblically based argument, which we will see much more of as we move forward in the series. This is going to come up again in the next episode, and probably the episode after that, and then probably we'll reference Christian scripture for probably the rest of this series. But anyway, Filmer went on to say that not only did God choose the sovereign, what's up, creativity? So not only did God choose the sovereign, but God chose Adam, the first man, to be sovereign of the world, and that all people should then recognize that sovereigns are chosen by God to give power over the world. And that this is it's kind of a hinky argument, and you can go read Patriarcha if you really, really want to, right? But if Adam had sovereignty over the world, fathers have sovereignty over their worlds, and as the father of the state, the sovereign has power over the state, right? So this is where we get Patriarcha from. Obviously here, patriarch, right? So there's this sort of justification of fathers are in charge, fathers are in charge, fathers are in charge. God made it this way on purpose. Therefore, God chooses kings. Kings are therefore the only people that we should listen to. And while Hobbes said we should only listen to the king, Hobbes said that God really wasn't that big of a deal, and Hobbes was stupid. Don't listen to Hobbes. Listen to me. The world dunks on us because we're consistently jerks to the entire world. Theory, this is partially accurate, and I cannot dispute that entirely. AI does make things way too easy. I agree that nobody wants to open it. Well, maybe not nobody. Many people are finding it easier to use large language models than learn it on their own through reading. I don't want to say nobody. Try to stay away from absolutes if I can. Silly Christians burning books and wondering why people get mad when they put their book in everything. Right? Unreal Brian, it's quite likely that ChatGPT told me that I'm full of it. I tend to think that I'm full of it myself, right? Such a flawless counter argument. He's stupid, don't listen to him, listen to me. Right? That's his argument. Like, he did it wrong because he left God out of it. And God, well, I mean, to be fair here, Filmer was very convinced that God was the root of sovereignty on earth. And if God is sovereign over the universe and a sovereign is over the state, that sovereignty has to be linked for it to be valid, right? So God chooses the king. And if God chooses the king, that's how the king justifies ruling, because they are chosen by God. Maybe it would be better to say that people don't like to do old school research when it's easier to look up and not confirm the source. Yes, to that I will agree. And I knew what you were saying the first time. I just get really weird about like terminology and words and stuff like that. Please do not take my weird neuroticisms as a criticism of what you said. That it's just me being weird, right? Terrible how autocorrect is even on phones. Yeah, for sure. Right. Traditional as old as white men bickering over the right to rule to make up the marketplace of ideas. Yeah, pretty much. I know, Brian. I was just being silly. Nobody wants to work anymore. Well, you know. Marx would say differently, which is a blow up to people who probably would say nobody wants to work anymore, but also hate Marx. Wait, I would agree with Marx. Most people don't want to be exploited. That's true. Now people want to work hard. That's up for debate. That's true. That's also true. Anyway, so no one wants to read. Most people don't want to read or comprehend Marx anymore, right? But I'm going to do that thing again, where like I don't know if I want to say no one. Anyway. So, Filmer, interestingly here, published this, and it didn't really get a lot of attention while he was alive. It didn't actually get published for broad consumption until about 17 years after he died. It only got published in 1680. He died in 1653. But what's really interesting is that when people start reading this stuff, it's during, again, the sort of larger backdrop of England arguing about how they pick their kings. And around the time that the Stuart line is finally about to get kicked out, well, not completely kicked out because technically William and Mary were Stuart cousins. But anyway, during the time of the Glorious Revolution, this is in 1688, where the people of England basically tell the last of the Stuart kings, you suck and we're kicking you off the throne and we're bringing more people in. These kinds of ideas that Filmer is talking about are going to get picked up by people that are going, but no, people don't choose kings, God chooses kings, right? And obviously they want to keep their guy on the throne, right? So saying that humans don't have the right to remove a godly appointed sovereign, you can see how that would be very beneficial for them. And they start looking for justification for their ideas, and they go, aha, Filmer said this 17 years ago, or at that point like 22 years ago, so we could obviously use this, right? This is a good justification for our idea. Ooh, lots of chat. Let me try to catch up with chat. You want to work hard, but I don't want to spend your energy on drudgery. That's fair. One of our basic needs is to be a contribution to our society, and that's hard under late-stage capitalism. I understand that one. Don't mind working hard, but you like for it to be meaningful. Yep, I completely feel you on that one. You love your job. You work at a bowling alley. Fun facts. You started as early as ancient Egypt. Yeah, there we go. I mean, hey, if you love your job, do it, right? Being a stay-at-home mom was the hardest job you ever had, and you definitely loved it the most. There you go, right? You hate working. You tend to hurt yourself. Ooh, timely, right? God chooses kings that worked well so far. That worked so well for Egypt, right? Yeah. You have Sabaton's Careless Rex running through your head. Well, there we go, right? Now we're talking, right? Anyway, so Filmer has some ideas, and they get kind of popular later on, and people are starting to talk about this. And this is where we get to the last guy that we'll talk about tonight. And you may have heard this guy's name, John Locke. Too many H's there. John. Is reading all day and taking care of a bunch of animals all day a job? You'd like that one. I'm sure that that's a job somewhere. I have a really lucky turn of the world where I get to teach, and boy, do I love doing that. Right? I really love teaching. I'm very lucky to have the position that I have. And I take that very seriously, right? Like I have this position that a lot of people would like, but they don't have. And man, whew, got to take that to heart. Anyway, so John Locke. First off, who's this guy? Well, he starts off as a doctor. Studies medicine and biology, and being a doctor was quite good at it, highly educated. This puts him in contact with a lot of people that are kind of in the circles, right? In the echelons, right? In high society. So he's rubbing shoulders with a lot of people that are very influential, and of course, these ideas are now starting to be talked about. By the way, John Locke, born 1632, died 1704. So obviously, we're moving a little bit further in time here. So there's a lot of stuff talking and happening and going on, and he's sort of hitting this, again, this English Civil War, Glorious Revolution thing, kind of right on the cusp of it happening. Like right when he kind of gets into adulthood, all of this stuff is going crazy. He's hobnobbing. There you go. That's, yeah. So people start asking him stuff, and he's like, well, I've got some ideas. And he starts writing them down, right? And this is where we're getting to the liberty part of this, right? His most famous work are the two treatises on government. Two treatises on government. And let's kind of talk about what these are. Now, again, he holds a lot of these ideas and writes more stuff than just these things, but those are the ones that are going to be the most cited by people, and you're going to see these as the central text. If you talk about John Locke, these are going to be the things that show up the most, right? These two treatises on government. So what was the first treatise on government? The first treatise was Filmer was wrong. And the entire first treatise on government, which, by the way, is not the most famous one. The second one is actually more famous than the first. The first one was just, nah, Filmer was wrong. You were surprised to learn fairly recently that Locke is also considered a progenitor of semiotics. Interesting, Unreal Brian. Was there a particular work that they applied that to, or did they just sort of take his larger philosophical methodology and kind of pick that out of it? I'd actually be really interested looking into that. You got things that I could read? Like, because now you've got my interest peaked, and now I want to read some stuff. So, Filmer is wrong. Okay, so how is Filmer wrong? Filmer was getting more popular. Locke felt like he needed to say, shut up, no. First off, Filmer didn't understand Scripture. And he gets Filmer taken to task here on misquoting and cherry-picking Scripture. You're doing it wrong. Most notably, one of the things that Locke calls out is all of the scriptural evidence that would go against Filmer's argument just doesn't happen to be discussed, right? Like, oh, you picked the verses that only supported your idea, but you didn't take any of this that says the opposite. Well, that's just very convenient. And so as to not necessarily run afoul of saying that God was dumb or that Scripture was wrong, Locke felt the need to kind of explain this on a more logical frame here. So, like, okay, he's citing Scripture wrong and he's using things really dumb, but let's take his idea and let's break down some of his ideas. It sounds familiar, right? At the very end of the essay concerning human understanding, yes, there we go. It's one of the last things he wrote, I think. Locke sets forth a division of the sciences. He sees sciences as having three branches. The first he calls natural philosophy, or physica, right? Its concern is the nature of things as they are in themselves. We're actually about to get to a lot of his natural philosophy here in just a second. He calls the second ethics or practica. Sure, we're going to get to that just a little bit. Its object and its study is what a man ought to do as rational and voluntary. Yep. There we go. That's interesting. Yeah, okay, I can see that. Yeah. No, you're good. The capitalist view of liberty seems to be more like freedom to be exploited by the elite, freedom for a few to hoard power and exploit the majority. So, theory, Locke would not appreciate that very much. The rest of it is, as a rational and voluntary agent for the attainment of any end, especially happiness. Right, we'll talk about happiness. The third science he calls the doctrine of signs, or semiotic. Okay. The field is the study of the ways and means whereby the knowledge of both natural and ethical are attained and communicated. Interesting. Okay. I mean, that's straight out. Yeah. I'm going to have to read that again. I've read that once, and it was in my third year of college in the middle of chaos. And I'll be really honest and say that I didn't retain most of it. Okay, so Filmer is wrong. He's ignoring evidence to this contrary, and he cherry-picked Scripture badly, right? So let's look at this Adam argument. Again, Filmer said Adam was the sovereign, da-da-da-da-da. So let's play this out. According to Locke, if Adam was sovereign, and there could only be one sovereign, and Adam was put in charge of the entire world, then it follows logically that Adam's heir would be the sovereign, right? So Adam dies, his heir would take over that sovereignty, and that one person would be sovereign over the entire world. And so Locke said, for Filmer's argument to be legitimate, we would need to know who the current heir of Adam is. Would the real heir of Adam please stand up? And there can only then ever be one king, right? Because there's only one king given. There's only one sovereignty given to Adam, and then there's only one sovereignty ever. So how do we justify having, 200 nations and 200 kings? We can't. There's only one, and that person's in charge of everything. And because we can't tell who that heir of Adam is, no sovereign is legitimate. Because they can't prove it. If they could prove it, that person would be sovereign of the world. But because we don't know who that sovereign is, ain't nobody sovereign. Right? Locke was much more fair and balanced than what we see of liberty today. Completely true. You haven't read the essay. It's not exactly light reading. It isn't. It is not, Brian. OG Mountain Dragon, welcome in. Dun, 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 dun. Synthfan streams. Thank you so much for the follow. Welcome to the adventure. What do you stream, Synthfan? If you stream, what do you stream? Let me know. It was not because of too many partners. No, it was because I was trying to graduate early and I was taking way too many classes and had way too many jobs. For most of college, I'll put it to you this way. The fewest number of jobs I ever had at any point in college was 2. It ranged from 4 to 2. I think in my junior year when I was taking that, I had 3 jobs. We do have a puppy back, and I told Claire that if the puppy came back around, we would switch over to Puppy Cam. So let's switch over to Puppy Cam and say hello to Kaylee. Hey, puppy. Where are you going? What you doing? And there we go. Little bit more puppy. Oh my goodness, what you got? Oh, you're stretching? You need to go outside? If you need to go outside, go see Brittany. She'll take you outside. Such a good girl. Looks in the general direction of 8 Mile, right? You're the preacher. The preacher kid in you is so mad. Adam's heir is Christ. The Bible is pretty explicit about that. Well, yeah, but if Christ then doesn't have children, that means there ain't no sovereigns, right? So, and also that's only Adam. Christ is only Adam's descendant according to the book of Matthew. It does not talk about that in the other gospel. So, just saying. In Luke, rather. You stream mostly What's-a music. Okay, cool. And some swarm-solving crossword puzzles. Yeah. And City Guesser. Interesting. Seems legit. Locke did declare all humans free by nature, yet invested in the slave-trading Royal African Company and justified slavery for captives. Yeah, we're going to talk about that in just a second. I'm not letting him off the hook. I promise. We don't let people off the hook in the room here. Okay, fine. You got me. You're the heir of Adam. You've been trying to skate under the radar because the whole sovereign thing just cramps your style. Cake for everyone. Cave. I would completely support you as heir of Adam and sovereign of the world. Purely because I think you do a good job at it, but also because I think I would benefit greatly from that. Because you would need trusted advisors, and you would probably, in many cases, be like, I don't know what the heck I want to do. Shane, what do you think you should do? And I'd be like, we should do this. And I would totally be the most virtuous version of Worm Tongue possible, right? Yes, it can be chocolate and gluten-free if you want it. And we don't have to use eggs either. We can use egg substitutes if you prefer vegan, right? Everybody gets cake of whatever kind you would like. You would totally appoint me to do all the work while you napped and played games, and I would probably work myself to death, right? Okay, cool. So, Filmer was wrong. Adam's argument is wrong. But here's some interesting things. Locke goes, but I kind of like Hobbes. Hobbes has got some ideas. Let's talk about some of the overlap here where Locke and Hobbes agree. Locke likes this idea that that man is naturally free, right? If we're talking about man in the natural state, again, this sort of like no governmental apparatus in present, you just got to think that man is free, right? Now, there's a kicker to this. No one can tell somebody else what to do. Okay, that's an interesting viewpoint here, because if I tell you that you must do something, that's me impinging on your liberty, right? Right? If I tell you you must do this, this is impinging on your freedom. Okay. And laws don't really exist. Okay, fine. So in the natural state, there aren't really laws as we understand them, because laws apply that there's some sort of larger agreement on things, and we can't imply that there has to be agreement, because if there must be agreement, that means some people aren't getting what they want, and we can't have that if everybody's free as a natural state. Okay, so we've got some overlap here with Hobbes. Hobbes is all about people being, kind of open and able to do whatever they want to, right? He also says that people should be able to unite to protect basic rights. Okay, so now again, we're starting to look like Hobbes. This is kind of social contract-y thing here, where I'm going to team up with somebody else and I'm going to protect my rights. What are those rights, you might ask? Well, he has 3 basic rights, right? He says life, right? You are guaranteed to live, right? Number 2, liberty. This crazy idea, liberty, right? We have the right to be free. And property. And you go, wait, what about the pursuit of happiness? Yeah, we fudged that one. We'll get there, right? Life, liberty, and property. And what's interesting here is that when he defines property, he talks about yourself being your property, right? Like, I own me. I possess me, right? So I am part of my property, right? And in the most basic way, if I don't have anything else, I still have me. And I have the right to me and the life that lives inside of this thing, right? He also thinks that people should protect themselves against tyranny. And Locke is pretty open here that he's not necessarily the world's biggest fan of the monarch. And tyranny is a problem. And he says that when people get absolute power, they tend to jack things up and act really mean and take away other people's life and liberty and property. And you shouldn't do that. And what he says here, and he makes this argument fairly vehemently, and he says that not only do we have the right to protect ourselves against tyranny, we almost have the obligation to defend ourselves from tyranny. So not just do we have the right to do it if we want to, he doesn't say this explicitly, but he makes a really weighty argument that it is the right thing to do to stand up to tyranny. And that as a people that are yearning to be free and practice our life, liberty, and property, we should stand up against tyranny, and we should want to get rid of it because it's not natural, right? So we've got some overlap here with Hobbes. Remember, Hobbes said if the ruler isn't holding up their part of the social contract, we have the right to pick a new ruler. So this is echoing Hobbes pretty clearly. Now, obviously, there are some philosophical differences. We should not overlook those differences. But a person that is a Hobbesian and a person that is following Locke are going to have governments in certain ways that look certain similarities, even if they don't necessarily agree on why. They're going to be okay with certain outcomes, even if they have different logic on how to get there, right? Mine is a benevolent authoritarian cake regime. The U.S. regime does not agree. That's true. I don't want to live to be free. You can't tell me what to do. There we go. That's not tautology. It's a crud. What is that word? It's not a direct oxymoron. Property equals happiness. Yay, capitalism. Not the formula that is put in place when Jefferson is writing the Declaration of Independence. And it's also worth pointing out that when Jefferson was writing the Declaration of Independence, he had John Adams and Benjamin Franklin yelling in his ear the whole time. They told him to write it because they liked the way that he wrote, and then they badgered the crap out of him about the way that he wrote it. Which is like, why didn't you just write it yourself then? I actually mentioned this a couple of days ago in the Discord. Adams was very aware that he talked down to people, and he didn't want the Declaration of Independence to sound like it was coming from him, because he wanted people to read this and be inspired. He was wise enough to understand, like, probably shouldn't write that myself, but also, Jefferson, you got to fix this and this and this and this and this. So, not letting go of control, Adams, just kind of, I don't know, ceding a little bit of that sovereignty, right? Unless we make laws that tell you can't own yourself. That's true. Liberty applied only to propertied white men, excluded women, the poor, and colonized peoples. Yeah. I promise you, I'm not going to let Locke off the hook. We could actually go ahead and talk about that right now. So, Locke, when he's talking about all of this stuff, sounds very high and mighty, right? He's not really making the argument universally. He leaves out a lot of people, right? The government that Locke would propose is not one that would include a lot of people, including people that were enslaved, women, people that had any sort of developmental or mental issue that made them lose faculties, right? He's not a Kantian. Kant hadn't even been born at this point, I don't think. But he's definitely not necessarily talking about universal application of these ideas. As Theory brought up, he actually did buy into the English slaving companies and made money off of a lot of these venture capital movements to enslave people from Africa and move them to America. And one of the reasons why he got in on these investments is because of the circles and hobnobbing that he was doing. He knew these people that were building these companies that were making a lot of money doing this stuff. And they were like, hey, Locke, you want to make some money? And he was like, sure, why not? And he didn't really put his ideas where his money was, right? He didn't keep his money where his mouth was. And we'll get to this. Well, actually, we can go ahead and do this right now. He did have a lot of ways that he disagreed with Hobbes. Most notably, he doesn't like the idea of monarchy, right? He's not really a pro-absolutist monarch dictator, the kind of the way that Hobbes was. And this idea here of sovereignty is a tricky one. And Theory brought up a little bit of this earlier. Hobbes didn't really talk a lot about how the ruler exerts this power just that we give it to those people, and what they do is to be followed regardless, right? Once we select them, they're supposed to tell us what to do, and we're supposed to do it, accepting that it no longer protects us, and then we have the right to get rid of them. Locke looks a lot more at how governments operate, and one of the interesting things that he brings in is a very, very lengthy and detailed discussion about conquest. And he uses this as an interesting kind of foil to how kings and governments work sometimes without the consent of the people that are their subjects. And here's one of the things that he would point out. For example, let's say I'm king of England, and I go to the New World with my army, and I take over all of this territory in the New World, right? I tell those people, you are now my subjects, but I'm taking from them liberty, and I'm taking from them life and sometimes property, right? And Locke said that's kind of the way that governments just get to operate. And if they do that, those people in many cases aren't going to be able to stand up against the sovereign, or they're not going to be able to protect themselves from the government because they're in smaller numbers. They don't have the same amount of power, etc. And Locke kind of says, and yeah, that's just kind of how it works sometimes. He kind of gives an apology for that and says, yeah, this stuff happens. And a lot of people want to say that this was him like tacitly approving of the slave trade, tacitly approving of genocide against Native Americans. And I don't know. He never comes right out and says, oh yeah, just go kill all the Native Americans. And I think that this is one of those problems where ideologically people have made really, really, really big arguments, and they stumble upon an example where they go, oh crap, I forgot about that. And then they don't want to have to rework the entire argument from scratch. Yeah, theory, I promise you, I'm getting there. He runs into this issue of conquest and slavery, and he's like, crap. No. I am very excited that you are passionate about this. What I want to convey is I'm not ignoring that position. That I'm not trying to say like, oh, shut up, I'm getting there. That's not what I'm saying. Like, what I'm trying to say is you are anticipating where I'm going. I'm happy that you're anticipating where I'm going, right? So it's more like when we're driving to the vacation and we're getting to like almost to the place, and I'm like, we're getting there. We're not there yet. We're getting there, right? Okay, cool. I just didn't want you to... No, you're fine. I just didn't want you to think that I was trying to step on you, right? That was not my intention. So, anyway, Locke writes all this stuff, comes up with it, and I think that this is the issue where he goes, crap, I don't know how to solve this problem. I don't think Locke personally liked the idea of slavery as a practice. I don't also know if he would have tried to stop it. Right? So, in many cases, especially dealing with stuff like abolition, we tend to forget that most people in the discussion around slavery were not pro or anti openly. Most people were just like, it's a thing because I don't enslave people. It's not directly affecting me that much. Even if you look at slave owning societies in England, and especially like in the American South, the percentage of people that were that owned or enslaved people was very, very small. Now, the economy was largely built on the practice of slavery, And many people benefited from slavery, even if they did not directly enslave people, right? A lot of the buildings, a lot of the infrastructure, a lot of the foundation of the economy of America and England and other countries, France, Spain, Portugal, the Netherlands to a certain extent, depending on where we are and what time we are. A lot of this was benefiting from slavery, but the average person just saw that as the way that the economy functioned. Right? So if you were to ask the average person, are you pro-slavery or anti-slavery? A lot of people wouldn't have open vocal pro or anti things. They would just say, I just want to make money, right? I just want to provide for my family. I just want to do this or that. And I don't know if we recognize that enough, even in the intellectual circles. Today's world, we like to force people onto one side or the other. If you pick some third option of opinion, the other two sides will chew your face off, right? Now we're back to the Jaguar, right? So I don't know if Locke was super anti-slavery or super pro-slavery. I think he probably looked at it as a problem, but didn't know how to fix it. So he gives this really mealy-mouthed, wishy-washy discussion about it and says, well, that's just how conquest works, and some people are just going to end up getting enslaved. And while we all have life, liberty, and property, if you end up enslaved, well, I mean, what are you going to do about it? You can't really do anything about it because you don't have enough power at that point to push back against the tyranny that you're under. But this is why we need to act together, right? But I don't know where he stood on that. Maybe there are people out there that are Locke scholars, right? That would know more about his personal beliefs on that. I will admit that I don't know enough about his individual personal beliefs about slavery. I've only read the stuff that pertains to this particular discussion and then a couple of other things, but I've never gotten deep into that. Maybe that's a fault on me, perhaps. We could have had Shanestown instead of Jamestown. No, I don't want to be a cult leader. Just lamentably of his times. Yeah, Frank, unfortunately, most people were. And I think Locke is very firmly of his time. He had some ideas that were ahead of his time, but he was still a well-to-do English noble person with a lot of, well, I don't know if he was noble. He was a well-to-do English person that moved in high circles that had access to a lot of funds and connections that greatly benefited his life. And I don't know if he really saw that one way or the other. I don't know. Somebody's welcome to Google that real quick if you wanted to. You always did like me better than... Oh, which one? There are multiple. When we're talking about liberal democracy, that's the liberal opinion. It is what it is. Conservatives and leftists are more concerned with fighting for a change. Yeah. No, you're fine. It's amazing that you can hear today's versions of that argument, for sure. He didn't want concentrated power. He wanted concentrated power that included him. Sure. You've got to hit the hay so you can get up for work tomorrow. All right. You are very welcome. Thank you very much. That's the plan. You know which one. Okay, cool. I'll take it that. So the slavery problem, he would say that slavery violates the natural order, right? So we could take that point in him saying, oh, well, look, it violates the natural order. But does that mean we should just stop everything and get rid of it? But one of the things that's interesting about this point of view is that if you see Locke, well, the natural order, of course, being that there are no laws and everybody has the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Or not pursuit of happiness, life, liberty, property, right? So if it violates the natural order, it's got to be bad, but then he also doesn't say we should stop it. So, like, again, kind of halfway, wishy-washy. He does use this as an example, though, and says, look, if you submit to a sovereign, like if you give all of your power to an absolute ruler, like Hobbes said, what you're doing is putting yourself in slavery to that absolute ruler, and you shouldn't do that because that violates the natural order. You're basically self-enslaving to the sovereign, and you shouldn't do that because it violates the natural order. Would the natural order be anarchy? Well, as long as we're understanding that he saw humans as capable of banding together and doing good things, he's not as harsh on humanity as Hobbes was. He is actually going to say that the government should really only function by the consent of the majority, right? So while government is kind of a necessary evil, the best way to do that is to make sure that the most people are served by these things. He doesn't necessarily or argue for democracy or for kingdoms or for aristocracies or oligarchies. He just doesn't like that absolute ruler. So he says if everybody decides to have a king, that's okay, but that king is not somebody that should be absolute, right? That's interesting. You view anarchy more as the collectivist than the liberal democracy. Yeah. So anarchy is a tricky word, and it gets used by people on many points of the political spectrum, right? So we have like the purge, right? That's on one side of anarchy, where this is like Hobbesian anarchy, where natural order is everybody's just murdering and pillaging and taking whatever they want and killing people like fun, right? And on the other side of it, you have the utopian anarchists that think that if people just had everything that they needed, there would be no need for violence or law. So what we should do is work towards meeting everybody's needs, and when everybody's needs are met, there won't be a need for a law that says don't commit murder, because nobody's going to need to commit murder because everything's utopia. This gets into the utopian socialists, people like Henri Saint-Simon. We'll talk about him a little bit later on, maybe next-ish episode, but probably later. But there were a lot of people that were in the full liberalism, early socialism movement that said anarchy could be peaceful and happy and everybody's needs get met, right? Anarchy doesn't inherently equal chaos. It doesn't have to. It can. It sometimes does, but it doesn't have to. You would say individualist anarchist versus collective okay, I see what you're saying, right? So like as an individual, I don't have any rules, I don't have any laws because I don't need to, I can take care of myself, is different than having a group of people that don't have rules because then they just do whatever they want to. Right. Sam, what's up? What people need is a law that says don't murder. It would be cool if we had one of those, right? I don't like the framing of utopia. I find it very naive. We will always have impersonal differences and conflicts. There is no utopia. I'm of that opinion as well, Theory. Not all of the early socialists were. Some of them literally... and that actually became a bit of a point of contention that started splitting off more of the utopian socialists from some of the early people that would go on to later follow like Marxist socialism. Because of course Marx is going to argue that we need to have violence to overthrow the bourgeoisie, whereas the utopians would be like, we just make sure that everybody has everything that they need and then there won't be any classes, right? You're also a well, there we go, right? So we've got all kinds of people here, and as long as everybody's chill, we're all chill too, right? Okay, so government should be by the consent of the majority. He doesn't necessarily argue for any particular version of government as long as everybody chooses it, right? This is going to start setting in the idea of majority rule, right? And interestingly here, he's going to start discussing the different types of powers and how people can consent to different types of governmental powers. And he gives examples like, how should people consent to legislative power? And is that different than how people should consent to executive power? So we start seeing this idea here where we've got divisions of government. Obviously, this is going to go on to be a really, really big deal. But we have different types of power that gain individual power by people consenting to be governed. And then those different types of power do things a little bit different way, process things a little bit different way, decide things a little bit different way based on the population. So interesting things to keep in mind, right? So how was this received? Locke publishes these treatises on government. How did they get received? A lot of people don't read them. If we're being honest, a lot of people just don't read them. And he gets a lot more popular by the middle and late part of the 1700s. And you might recognize the fact that we've referenced the Declaration of Independence several times tonight. Obviously here, life, liberty, and property turns into life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, right? So these ideas of consent by the governed, division of powers, all of these things are very Lockean in nature. The anti-absolutist monarchical stance is obviously going to be a big deal, but not really very widely read. Again, during the Glorious Revolution, people are looking for ways to justify their position in the Glorious Revolution, and by saying, oh, kings and queens are okay as long as they govern with the consent of the governed, and we don't want these kings anymore, so we're going to go get a new one. And they're going to say, look, we've got this guy Locke, and he says that kings are okay as long as they're doing things the right way and as long as we all agree, so we just don't agree, and we're going to go get a new one. And at the same time, people are like, no, Filmer said absolute king. So you see how all of this stuff is kind of floating around and marinating in the soup, right? But what ends up happening because of all of this stuff is that political philosophy really starts getting off the ground. And by the time we get to the next stream, it's going to be something that not just English people are writing about. We're going to start seeing these ideas pop up a lot more because people like Hobbes spent a lot of time in Paris, published books in French, right? The intellectual circles of the time between England and France were fairly tight. So these ideas, even if they're not necessarily being written down and published so much in France, are definitely being thought about and talked about in France. So we're going to see a lot of French thinkers next time that are going to have a lot of really different ideas and a lot of interesting takes on this stuff. But we're going to start seeing the same sort of beats, and we're going to come down to this absolutist monarch versus constitutionalism kind of thing. And that's going to dominate most of the Enlightenment era. How do we determine how to authoritatively give our power to the government? That's the tricky question. It's the tricky question. Paradox Moose says, got to get Star Wars tech before that. Or Star Trek tech. Dude, if we had the replicator... Oh, you just fixed it to Star Trek. Yeah. I mean, if we had the replicators, the world would be way better, right? We could just poop in a bucket and turn that into gold. Because that's what the replicators do, right? I'm more of a silver pilsist. There you go. Okay. Someone invent a replicator. Yep, and I'm just commenting the chat that's happening, right? Got some chatter. Okay, who taught the French how to read? The French had printed books before the English did, like off of the printing press. Got some talking. Okay, So that kind of wraps up where we are at the moment. If anybody has any questions about the stuff, you're obviously welcome to follow up. But that is all that I had planned for the night. Lots of good chat today, though. So that was very welcome. Do, 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 do. All right, let's see who is on, and if there are no questions, we will go ahead and do a raidy raid. It's been a long day, ladies and gents. When is the next stream? I don't know. Maybe tomorrow. I might build models tomorrow, or I might build a model tomorrow. The next history discussion stream will be Thursday next week. And we'll pick up where we left off tonight, and we'll go into a bunch of French people. And how they started changing the game. Tad came in and I missed him. Tad, where'd you come? Where? Everybody's name is the same color. Oh, there we go. There's Tad. Or my birthday Nepo stream. Yeah. So my wife's birthday is coming up, and she gets a nepotism stream. So if she figures out what she wants for her nepotism stream, that could be the next history discussion. We'll do a viewer request 101 for nepotism stream. Where are we going to go? I think we raided Eris last time. No, not last time. Recently. We might go raid Nerduino. Let's do poppies, though. You don't want a military parade, just a stream. There we go. Right? Let's do poppies, and we'll do poppies on the way out. Let's go raid Nerduino. We haven't raided him in a few times here. Nerduino is a former NASA scientist and is talking about Earth science tonight. So we're going to go raid Nerduino. Thanks to everybody that's involved tonight. Lots of chat. Good chat. Thanks to all the subscribers. You can see their subscriber badges in chat. Also, thanks to my patrons on Patreon. And you can see the command there if you are interested. There's only one Patreon thing, and it's literally called the alternate subscription. If you don't want to give Jeff Bezos money by subscribing here on Twitch and you still want to support the channel, you can go to Patreon. If you want to send me a book, there are a list there with books. And let's do poppies on the way out. So here we go. Here we go. Poppies, peacefulness, love. Hope everybody has a good night. When we get to Nerduino's chat, our raid call is going to be adventure. And you can put some exclamation points behind that. And maybe tomorrow you can have a great day. It's just over the corner. You can see me pointing at it just there off screen. But thanks, everybody. Have a good one. Let's go share some love with Nerduino.